Abdullah entered my life as a figure shrouded in mystery, yet impossible to ignore. When I met him, I immediately realized he was no ordinary man. His presence was so intense, it seemed to cut through flesh and reach directly into the soul. He didn't need to raise his voice to assert authority, nor resort to outward displays to prove what he knew. His strength lay in his silence, in a gaze that seemed to see beyond the visible, as if contemplating the world from the inside out. And it was precisely this inverted vision that transformed my understanding. That reality is not something that happens to us, but something we project from within ourselves. I was still a restless seeker, eager to comprehend the mystery of life, yet deeply bound by the logic of the senses. I believed the external world held its own power, that circumstances were independent forces capable of imprisoning or freeing me. It was Abdullah who dispelled this illusion within me. He didn't bring a philosophy to be discussed in books or debated in salons, but a living, direct, and relentless practice. For him, there was no middle ground. Either you embrace the creative power of your imagination, or you remain a hostage to a world that merely reflects what you dare not change within. In those encounters, often brief and filled with silences more eloquent than words, I learned that the true master is not one who gives you ready-made answers, but one who forces you to look within, where all answers already reside. Abdullah showed me that life is not an enigma to be deciphered, but a projection to be claimed. He didn't let me depend on him, didn't offer me shortcuts, but confronted me with the naked truth. I was the creator of my reality, even if I didn't want to admit it. That is why I say that speaking of Abdullah is not just telling about a man who lived, but revealing a presence that continues to echo in every teaching. He was the mirror that forced me to face my own divinity. Through him, I realized that every person who crosses our path is not by chance, but a reflection of what we need to learn. Abdullah was that elevated reflection, a guide who freed me from dependence on appearances and launched me into the supreme responsibility, to recognize that the I am is the sole cause and all else is effect. And it is in this spirit that I wish to guide you now, because just like me, you also carry the creative spark within you. Just as I needed someone to awaken me, perhaps this moment is your awakening. Not about who Abdullah was in his external biography, but about who he represents within you. The silent voice that insists nothing is outside, everything is within. And when you understand this, nothing in your life will remain the same. Who really was Abdullah? Many describe him simply as an Ethiopian rabbi who lived in New York, a man with striking features, dark skin, simple clothes, and direct manners. But for me, he was much more than a historical figure or a biographical curiosity. He was the living embodiment of a truth I had not yet understood, that man is God in expression, and that imagination is the sole creative power. When I met him, I expected a master who would give me external formulas, repetitive prayers, perhaps some secret kept in ancient scriptures. Instead, I found someone who didn't waste time with appearances or empty traditions, but who spoke with the authority of one who already lives in the certainty of what he teaches. He didn't explain the law as a teacher presents theories. He demonstrated it in his very way of living. Abdullah impressed me with his absolute disinterest in social conventions. He didn't seek to please, didn't care to soften words to make them more acceptable, nor did he bother to justify his statements before common logic. His confidence was so great that, in his presence, all resistance seemed to lose its power. He didn't need arguments to convince. His steadfastness was enough. He knew that imagination creates reality, and his entire life was proof of it. This was his way of teaching, not as someone who offers knowledge to the mind, but as someone who transmits a state of consciousness capable of inspiring the soul. What struck me most was realizing that he accepted no excuses. For any difficulty I presented, he was never impressed by external obstacles. I could say I had no money, that conditions were unfavorable, that everything around me proved the opposite. But he remained unshakable. It was as if he looked directly beyond the visible world and saw the outcome already fulfilled. This stance disconcerted me and at the same time drew me in, because it revealed that there was something I was not yet willing to see. He forced me, by the strength of his presence, to abandon the victim mentality and embrace the responsibility of a creator. But Abdullah was not just a severe and firm man. There was a silent sweetness in him, a compassion not expressed in caresses, but in not allowing me to deceive myself. His love manifested in not letting me feel small in the face of life. Unlike masters who seek submissive disciples, he accepted no dependence. He never wanted me to look to him as the source, but only as the finger pointing inward. He constantly reminded me that the true voice was within my own being, in the I am, and all else was noise. Who was Abdullah, after all? He was the mirror of a truth I didn't want to admit, that nothing external could save me because all the necessary power already resided within me. He was the master who forced me to cross the border between theory and practice, between desire and assumption, between believing and knowing. It doesn't matter if the world describes him merely as an enigmatic rabbi or an eccentric man. For me, he was the personification of an eternal principle, that every human being is the creator of their destiny. Seeing him live with such authority, I understood that it was not an abstract idea, but a concrete reality that manifested in his every gesture, every word, every silence. Thus, when I speak of Abdullah, I don't want you to imagine merely a distant character from history, but to recognize him as a symbol. He represents the voice that invites each of us to awaken, to no longer flee outward in search of solutions, but to turn inward and embrace the creative power that has always resided there. This is what made him unforgettable. He didn't give me easy answers, but he gave me myself. The first lesson I received from Abdullah was about the power of assumption. He didn't let me rest in desire as a mere wish, but pushed me to inhabit it as an accomplished fact. I vividly remember the occasion when I expressed my desire to visit Barbados. I told him I would like to go, but I had no money for the fare, nor any apparent means to make it happen. His response was as simple as it was sharp. "You are already in Barbados." He didn't want to hear my objections, didn't listen to the logical reasons that supported my impossibility. For him, the matter was settled the moment the desire was assumed as real. At first, I confess it irritated me. I thought, how can I pretend to be in Barbados if I'm here, walking the streets of New York? But Abdullah wasn't talking about pretense. He was talking about inwardly assuming a state with such conviction that the external world would have no choice but to reflect it. It wasn't a denial of visible reality, but an understanding that the visible is merely effect, shadow, consequence. The cause is always in the invisible, in what feels true, in silence. It was then that I realized, every time I accepted lack, I was only perpetuating it because the assumed state becomes law. What he wanted to teach me was that life never responds to what we ask for externally, but to what we accept ourselves to be internally. As long as I lived as someone who wanted to go to Barbados but admitted I couldn't, I remained in a state of impossibility. The moment I accepted Abdullah's suggestion and began to live inwardly, as if I were already there, something began to change within me. I started walking the cold streets of New York, feeling the warmth of the Caribbean sun. I began to imagine the smell of the sea, the texture of the sand, the landscape seen from a ship's window. It wasn't an empty exercise, it was a deep dive into conviction. And as a natural consequence, circumstances began to shift unexpectedly until, without my planning, the trip became possible. This lesson radically changed the way I understood desires. Before, I saw desire as a reminder of what I lacked. After Abdullah, I began to understand that desire is proof that reality already exists in another dimension of consciousness. Desire is not absence. It is the call to now assume the state of its fulfillment. This shift in perspective is what separates the dreamer from the creator. The dreamer waits, the creator assumes. From that moment on, I realized that all areas of life obeyed the same law. It didn't matter if the subject was money, health, relationships, or opportunities. What mattered was the state I dared to assume as my own. Abdullah taught me that man does not receive what he desires, but what he accepts as true. The external world, however solid it may seem, has no choice of its own. It is a mirror that precisely reflects the contents of the human heart. This was the first step in my transformation, to abandon empty desire and assume the invisible fact. I understood that the secret is not to fight against reality, but to rest in the feeling of the desire already fulfilled. Silent assumption, sustained with faith, is the key that opens all doors. And it was Abdullah who, with his serene authority, forced me to experience this until the truth revealed itself in my own life. The second lesson Abdullah imparted to me was the discipline of imagination. Until I met him, I believed that imagination was merely a creative faculty of the mind, useful for artists, writers, or dreamers, but without real effect on the concrete world. It was he who tore away that illusion and showed me that imagination is the very substance of reality, the invisible foundation of everything that exists. For Abdullah, imagining was not daydreaming, but acting at the deepest level of creation. He said that everything you see, touch, and call real has, at some point, been an image held in consciousness. Nothing escapes this law. I remember how he would scold me when I used my imagination to sustain states of doubt or failure. He would say, "You are always imagining. The question is not whether you imagine or not, but what you imagine." These words struck me like a shock. I realized that I often used my imagination against myself, creating scenes of fear, rejection, and impossibility. And then I was surprised when life confirmed precisely these images. Abdullah made me understand that imagination is like fertile ground that never rests. It will bear fruit, whether sweet or bitter, depending on the seed you plant in it. I then began to practice the conscious use of this faculty. He taught me to create internal images with vivid details, as if I were truly living it. It wasn't a light reverie, but a deep dive into the feeling of the scene. When I desired something, he would say, "Live as if it has already happened. See, hear, feel, until it is so real within you that the external world cannot deny it." This practice showed me that imagination is no less real than physical experience. On the contrary, it is the primary cause, the source from which what we call reality springs. An example I keep with me was when I began to imagine meetings and conversations that hadn't happened yet. I would close my eyes and clearly see the people, their expressions, their words. And when the physical moment arrived, everything unfolded so closely to what I had imagined that it would be impossible to call it a coincidence. It was at this point that I understood, viscerally, that imagination is life's secret rehearsal, and the external stage merely enacts what has already been rehearsed within us. This teaching freed me from dependence on the visible world. Before, I waited for circumstances to change before I would believe in new possibilities. After Abdullah, I understood that it is imagination that shapes circumstances, not the other way around. Thus, I stopped asking for external evidence and began to generate internal evidence. When the mind disciplines itself to sustain a clear image imbued with feeling, the entire universe conspires to give it form. The power of conscious imagination is the key to all spiritual awakening. Abdullah showed me that God is not outside, but within, and his language is the image we carry in our hearts. To create consciously is not to manipulate the world, but to recognize the power that has always been within us. Since then, I have learned to watch my images as one watches a garden, carefully choosing what I plant, because I know that sooner or later that will become my harvest. The third lesson I received from Abdullah was the value of inner silence. He showed me that true creation doesn't happen in the agitation of the mind, but in deep introspection, where the I am reveals itself as the cause of everything. At first, I didn't understand. My mind was always full of thoughts, worries, and justifications. I wanted to discuss, question, understand with logic, but Abdullah had no patience for mental noise. He would say, "Enter into silence, and there you will find power." This instruction seemed simple, but its depth only revealed itself when I began to practice. In silence, I realized that external life loses its power. The voices of the world, which insist on saying it can't be done, it's impossible, there's no way, begin to dissolve when attention turns inward. In this silent space, there are no limits, no barriers, no distance between desire and fulfillment. Silence is like an invisible womb, where assumed images take shape before being born into the sensory world. And it was in this secret place that I learned to plant my assumptions. There were nights when, lying down, I would close my eyes and allow my body to relax until I was almost asleep. In this state between wakefulness and sleep, silence became fertile. It was there that I constructed mental scenes, feeling myself already in the place I wanted to be, already possessing what I desired. There was no effort, just quiet conviction. This silent moment was the true altar of creation. Abdullah told me that if I could sustain a scene in this state of stillness, the external world could not resist. It would have to bend before what I had already accepted internally. In time, I realized that silence was not merely the absence of external noise, but the suspension of internal doubt. It was the calm that arises when you stop fighting appearances and begin to rest in the feeling of the fulfilled desire. It was in silence that I learned to trust. Instead of rushing out to try to make things happen with physical effort, I dove inward and let life take care of the how. This lesson transformed my relationship with problems. Before, I despaired in the face of challenges, trying to solve everything with haste and anxiety. Later, I learned that the answer always lay in returning to silence, assuming the desired state and waiting. Often, unexpected solutions emerged, people arrived, paths opened up without my having to force anything. Inner silence became my greatest ally, proof that creative force is not in the noise of disordered action, but in the calm of sustained faith. It was thus that I understood that silence is not emptiness, but fullness. It is in inner retreat that we find the voice of God, who never shouts but always whispers, "I am." In this silent whisper lies all power. Abdullah taught me to respect this sacred space and to return to it whenever the external world tried to convince me otherwise. Because in the end, it's not what the eyes see or the ears hear that creates life, but what the heart silently accepts as already being true. The fourth lesson I received from Abdullah was absolute trust in the law, what the world calls faith, but which few comprehend in its essence. I used to think that faith was believing in something distant, a hope that it might happen if I were deserving enough or if circumstances aligned. But Abdullah showed me that true faith asks for no external proof, because it is proof itself. He didn't believe in what could be, he lived as if it already were. This was the difference that transformed everything. I recall how he never hesitated. If I spoke of an impossibility, he didn't acknowledge it. For him, there was no middle ground. Either you assume and trust, or you remain bound by appearances. It was as if the senses, with all their contrary evidence, had no power over him, and it was exactly this that he taught me. that the visible world is merely a delay, a reflection, an echo. True power lies in the invisible, in what man dares to assume and sustain, even when nothing outside confirms it. This faith was not a passive attitude. It didn't mean crossing your arms and waiting for miracles, but living in coherence with the assumed state. When he said I was already in Barbados, it wasn't a metaphor. It was a call for me to feel and behave as if it were fact. And when I began to live in this way, I realized that life responded. Circumstances that seemed closed opened up. People I would never expect appeared, and everything organized itself so naturally that it seemed inevitable. It was as if external reality was forced to bend before sustained conviction. This unshakable faith also freed me from the fear of time. Before, I was anxious, wanting to know when things would happen, and suffered every day of waiting. Abdullah taught me that time is merely an instrument of sensory experience, but it has no power over the inner cause. When something is assumed, it is already accomplished, even if the world takes some time to reflect it. This understanding gave me peace. I learned to rest, not to worry about the how or the when. Life always finds the shortest path to manifest what we have already accepted as true. It was thus that I understood that faith is not effort, but rest. It's not hoping it will work out, but living in the certainty that it already has. Faith is the invisible ground that appears beneath our feet with every step, even when everything seems like an abyss. Abdullah showed me that this trust is the key to transcending fear, doubt, and limitation. And more than words, his own life was proof of this principle. He didn't preach faith, he embodied it. Since then, I have learned that faith is the greatest gift a person can give themselves. It is the daring to live from the invisible, to treat desire as already fulfilled, and to walk in the silent certainty that everything conspires to confirm that state. This trust is what moves mountains, not because the mountains change, but because you discover they were never really there. So when I look back and think of Abdullah, I don't see him merely as a master who crossed my path, but as a mirror that forced me to see what had always been within me. He didn't offer shortcuts, didn't give me rituals, didn't invite me to depend on him or any external force. What he did was remove the veil, so I would realize that the power had always been in my own hands, in what I dared to imagine, assume, and sustain in silence. His steadfastness taught me that life doesn't negotiate with doubts. It simply reflects the state a person carries in their heart. Everything I have shared here is not a distant memory, but a living call to you. The same power that Abdullah showed me is not reserved for a few. It is in every human being who dares to recognize themselves as a creator. You don't need to wait for conditions to change, nor ask the world for permission. Change begins the moment you choose to assume the state of fulfilled desire and live from it. The external world, sooner or later, will bow before your conviction. Therefore, right now, wherever you are, close your eyes and allow yourself to feel the reality you desire as already fulfilled. Let that feeling completely envelop you until no room for doubt remains. This is the moment of creation. This is the place where everything already is. Don't ask how it will happen. Don't worry about when. Life has its own wisdom, and it always fulfills what you dare to assume as true. The invitation is before you, to live as a spectator of appearances, or to awaken as a conscious creator. Abdullah showed me the way, and I share it with you. Now, assume your state. Live as if it were already real, and discover that the world is nothing more than a faithful reflection of what you have decided to be.
Close your eyes. Not to escape the world, but to remember where the world truly originates. Everything you see is merely a delayed reflection of what you've already chosen, consciously or not, within yourself. The human mind, restless and impatient, believes it needs signs, proof, and guarantees before acting, and it is precisely this need that prolongs the journey. The seeker of signs forgets that they are the sign themselves. While you await a response, you are affirming that you haven't yet decided. The truth is, the universe doesn't move by the force of desire, but by the solidity of decision. Desire is needy. Deciding is sovereign. Desire begs, I want. Decision commands, it is. The one who desires projects their power into the future. The one who decides brings it into the now. The difference is subtle, but it's the point where the impossible bends. When you say, with full consciousness, I decide, you are not speaking into the wind, you are pronouncing a law. This phrase is not the pronouncement of a small being asking for permission, but of a consciousness that knows everything already belongs to it in potential. The universe falls silent before a true decision because it recognizes the Creator's authority. Waters move, doors open, people and circumstances reorganize in silence to fulfill the decree. And this is why so few experience the true power of manifestation, because they prefer to ask, wait, postpone, negotiate with destiny, instead of assuming the inner throne and declaring, I decide. When you decide, time ceases to be linear. It bends to your vibration. Opportunities that seemed distant begin to seek you out, not because the world has changed, but because you've shifted from a state of doubt into a state of certainty. The I decide is not born of desperation, but of the consciousness of being. It is the instant when creation is complete, even before eyes can see it. Because in the realm of imagination, the only realm that truly exists, everything assumed with conviction is already done. Deciding is an act of death, not the death of the body, but of the old self, the one sustained by doubts, fears, and hypotheses. Each time you decide something absolutely, a part of you is left behind, because it can no longer coexist with the new state you've chosen to inhabit. This is why most people avoid deciding. They prefer the security of maybe to facing the void of the new. But creation does not flourish in the undecided. The law only responds to the total, the irreversible, the non-negotiable. When you say, I decide, you are burning the bridge back to the old state, declaring that the previous path is closed. And at that exact instant, the universe begins to reorganize itself. The one who doesn't decide lives like a shadow, always at the mercy of chance. They wait for circumstances to become favorable to act, and thus spend their life being shaped by external forces. The Creator, in contrast, decides first and then lets the world adjust. They understand that the physical world is not the cause, but the consequence. What seems solid and immutable today is merely the echo of past decisions. If you want to change the echo, change the voice that produces it, and that voice is your decision. Every true decision demands renunciation. There is no room to keep what was and still receive what will be. To decide is to say no to 1,000 possibilities in order to say yes to just one. And this wounds the ego, which loves to remain open, available, undefined. But power lies in focus. The universe only responds to what is clear. As long as you remain divided between desire and fear, creation remains suspended. Nothing manifests because nothing has been truly assumed. When you decide, dispersed energy collects, the mind quiets, and the body begins to act in coherence with the decided state. Even without realizing it, you begin to think, feel, and choose differently. Everything within you shifts in tone, and the invisible responds to this new inner sound. The old begins to unravel, not because you force it to leave, but because there is no longer space for it. Therefore, deciding is the first act of creation. There is no miracle without decision. The I decide is the moment the seed is planted, even if the soil still seems arid. Don't wait to feel ready, for readiness is born of choice. Decide, and preparation will come. Decide, and strength will come. Decide, and the path will open. Because the law does not obey those who hesitate, but those who declare with their whole being, the old has died, the new already is. And when this is said not by the mouth, but by consciousness, the universe bows, not out of submission, but out of recognition. One does not decide with words, but with posture. The universe doesn't read your lips, it reads your vibration. You can repeat "I decide" 1,000 times, but if your body still expresses doubt, if your breath betrays fear, and your mind oscillates between yes and no, nothing will move. A true decision is not a sound. It is a state. It is something that occupies every gesture, every glance, every pause. When the decision is authentic, even your silence becomes a command. It is the kind of certainty that doesn't need to be explained. It is felt. There are people who claim to have faith but spend their lives trying to convince themselves. Decision doesn't need convincing. It is simple, raw, and inevitable. It's like the moment a door closes and there's no turning back. The body straightens, the breath changes, the gaze fixes, the entire being aligns. It is in this coherence that power is born. The universe does not obey indecision because it sounds like noise, not direction. Creative energy is precise, and it moves only when it finds clarity. If you say "I decide to prosper," but still complain, still react with fear, still see yourself as small in the face of circumstances, then your decision is still merely an intention. The gesture contradicts the word, and the universe responds to what is dominant within you, not to what you utter, but to what you vibrate in silence. To truly decide, one must align words with conduct, thought with presence. When your inner state becomes one, there is no resistance in the world capable of preventing manifestation. Pure decision doesn't defend itself, doesn't argue, doesn't seek approval. It simply is. Just as the sun doesn't ask for permission to rise, the one who has truly decided doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Their posture speaks, and everything around, consciously or not, responds to this magnetism. People treat them differently. Doors open, coincidences multiply, not by luck, but by synchronicity. Coherence is the language of creators. Each time you act as if you still doubt, you negate your decision. Each time you remain firm, even in the face of the invisible, you reaffirm your authority. Body and soul must speak the same thing, and when they do, the world has no choice but to agree. Therefore, no longer speak about what you desire. Become it. Walk, breathe, and act as if you already are. Because when your posture becomes your prayer, the universe has already understood everything. Decide and persist. This is where many stumble. Deciding is simple. Persisting is an art. The human mind, impatient, seeks immediate results, and when it doesn't see them, it concludes that nothing is happening. Then it changes its state, changes its belief, changes its decision, and it is in this constant movement that creations unravel. The seed doesn't sprout because the soil is disturbed prematurely. The law hasn't failed, it simply hasn't had enough consistency to operate. When you decide something, the universe begins to reorganize itself in silence. But this process, invisible to the eyes, demands steadfastness. Appearances, for a time, will still carry traces of the old state. Circumstances will test your conviction, not because they want to punish you, but because the visible world is slow to catch up with the invisible. It is the reflection of the old image that is still dissipating. If you remain unwavering, you will see the new take shape. But if you return to the previous state, everything that was moving in your favor will disperse again. Persistence is the proof of faith. Faith is not waiting. It is knowing. Knowing that, even without signs, creation is already complete. When a farmer plants, they don't doubt each morning whether the seed will germinate. They simply trust, water, and wait. Your decision is your seed. To water it is to maintain your inner state aligned, to refuse to look at what is lacking, to deny the old even when it screams. And waiting, here, is not passivity. It is active trust. It is sustaining the vibration until the invisible becomes visible. The world is a school of patience for those who choose to create consciously. Every apparent delay is a disguised question. Do you persist in what you have chosen, or will you retreat? And the true answer is not in words, but in posture. To persist is to continue being, even when everything invites you to give up. It is to affirm internally, I have already decided, and this is irrevocable. When you persist, energy condenses, probabilities rearrange, and the impossible begins to take form. Everything that seemed still is, in fact, adjusting in silence. But only the steadfast perceive this, because the power of decision lies not in the instant you pronounce it, but in the ability to sustain it when the wind blows against you. So, decide and do not waver, not because you are stubborn, but because you know. The one who persists becomes immutable, and the immutable is what creates the new world. Do not ask for confirmation. The instant you ask for proof, you deny your own creation. The universe is perfect in its silence, and those who trust understand this language. When you truly decide, the invisible has already responded, and everything that follows is merely the inevitable unfolding of that decision. But the mind, accustomed to measuring, comparing, and controlling, cannot tolerate the invisible. It wants to see the sprout before the seed germinates, and that's where many lose power. They trade certainty for doubt, disguised as logic. The person who asks for confirmation reveals that they still don't believe in the power residing within them. They act like a servant who doubts the orders they gave, going back to ensure they were heard. But the Creator does not turn back. They speak once and fall silent. Silence is not weakness, it is authority. It is the confidence of one who knows that a word pronounced with conviction is already law in the invisible. And the law does not fail. What fails is the patience of those who doubt. Do not ask for signs, because the greatest sign is your own inner state. What you feel after the decision is proof that it has been received. If peace covers you, it's because the universe has already begun to work. If anxiety returns, it's because your mind has returned to wanting to control time. No result is born of control. It is born of surrender. And surrender is not giving up. It is confident yielding. It is to say, I have already determined and I am not concerned with how it will be fulfilled. External signs are merely echoes. The tree doesn't need to hear the sound of rain to know it will be watered. It simply extends its roots. So too is the conscious creator. They don't wait to see, they know. And because they know, everything manifests. The physical world is the last to receive the news. Reality is merely the delayed confirmation of what has already been decreed. When you ask the universe to prove something to you, you are saying, without realizing it, that you don't trust your own word that you uttered. And every doubt is a new decision. A decision contrary to the previous one. Therefore, many create and destroy with the same speed. Learn then to remain silent after deciding. Do not ask, do not seek, do not test. Mature faith does not examine the soil every day to see if the seed has grown. It simply continues living in the state of certainty. The invisible works in silence because true power is silent. One who needs to see to believe is still a student. One who believes without seeing has already understood the law. And the law only serves those who no longer ask for confirmation, because they have already become the answer themselves. Live the consequence of your decision, even if the scenario still lies. The lower mind believes what it sees. Awakened consciousness sees what it believes. This is the difference between one who repeats affirmations and one who becomes the affirmation itself. When you decide, the world may, for a time, appear the same. People will treat you the same. Bills will keep coming. Your body may still react as before. But none of this matters, because the visible is always the last to bow. The seed of the new state is planted, and the soil of physical reality just needs time to germinate what already exists in the invisible. Many give up at this point, thinking that nothing has happened. But the absence of signs is not a negation, it is gestation. The invisible is not ignoring you. It is organizing the variables that sustain what you have chosen to be. And if the impatient creator pulls up the seed to check its progress, they interrupt the miracle. The universe doesn't need you to supervise it. It needs you to sustain it. To live the consequence of the decision is to act as if you already are. It is not to react to the world, but to lead it. It is to maintain the vibration of the final outcome, even when the narrative still seems to contradict your choice. When you decide to be prosperous, no longer behave as one who hopes to prosper. Behave as one who already is. The difference is subtle, but powerful. The first seeks, the second radiates, and it is this radiation that attracts the events, people, and circumstances that confirm the assumed state. The mind will say, but I still don't see anything. And you will respond in silence because you are still looking with old eyes. Learn to see with feeling, not with the senses. Feeling is the antenna of creation. What you continuously feel becomes inevitable form. Therefore, when the world lies, the Creator smiles. They know that the lie is merely the last echo of the past. Persist in the consequence of your decision. If you have decided to love, feel love before it arrives. If you have decided to win, walk as one who has already won. Vibration precedes vision. There is no force in the universe capable of resisting a state sustained with faith and coherence, because in the end, reality is not a sequence of facts, but of sustained decisions. Every line of your destiny is written by the silent persistence of what you have chosen to be, and the world sooner or later will obey, because everything assumed with totality becomes law, and the universe with absolute precision will confirm what you once declared in silence. I decided, and so it is. Everything that exists in the visible world is the result of a silent decision made at some point in consciousness. Nothing happens by chance. Nothing arises from emptiness. Reality is merely the reflection of what was inwardly decreed with absolute conviction. And when you understand this, you cease to live as a beggar of destiny and become the author of the narrative you call life. I decide is not just an affirmation. It is the remembrance of a power that was always yours, but which you forgot by believing in appearances. When you say, I decide, the universe instantly reorganizes itself, even if your eyes don't yet perceive it. Every particle, every encounter, every deviation aligns in silence to serve your decision. This is why the true Creator speaks little. They know that words carry weight. They know that the sound that leaves their mouth shapes the fabric of reality. Therefore they speak once and remain silent, not out of doubt, but out of certainty. Silence is the seal of mature faith. The one who needs to repeat has not decided. The one who truly decides no longer needs to speak. The average person lives seeking signs, trying to understand the timing of things, as if the universe were something outside of them, a distant power to be persuaded. But awakening begins when you understand that the universe is your own extension, and therefore there is no need to convince what already obeys you by nature. Creation is automatic when consciousness is firm. This is why appearances only confuse the undecided. The decided see beyond them. Hesitation is the poison of manifestation. Fear is merely inverted faith. It is believing in the opposite of what you have chosen. Therefore, when fear visits you, do not fight it. Simply reaffirm in silence, I have decided, I have, and persist, because each time you maintain your decision in the face of chaos, you prove that the power is with you and not in the circumstances. The universe is faithful to the one who is faithful to their own word. It does not respond to what you ask, but to what you are. And to be is to decide. When you assume this state, you cease waiting for tomorrow, because you already inhabit what you desire today. The future bends before the Creator who sustains a total decision. For such a one, the impossible is merely a temporary stage before the inevitable. Then comes the moment of silence. After declaring, be silent. Do not look around seeking confirmation. Everything has already moved in your favor. Creation does not happen with noise, but with authority. The sea parts for those who walk without doubting their step. The mountain bows for those who walk without looking up. Reality obeys those who speak in the name of certainty. Therefore now, ask no more. Decide, feel, live as one who already is. Let the force of your decision fill every thought, every gesture, every breath, and observe. The world will begin to respond not because you convinced it, but because you have become one with what you have chosen. I decide is the return to the throne of being, the point at which creation recognizes its creator. And when you say it in a pure state, the entire universe, in silence, in order, and in reverence, simply obeys. Close your eyes. The world you see out there is not what truly exists. It is merely the echo of what vibrates within you. Every gaze, every encounter, every event that seems to happen is, in truth, the universe's silent response to what you feel to be true. Life is a mirror that never lies. It doesn't show you what you want, but what you are deep down. and as long as you believe you are an observer of circumstances, you will remain a prisoner of them. But the moment you understand that the external merely reflects your internal state, something changes. You shift from spectator to creator. What you call reality has no will of its own. It is malleable, plastic, obedient to the conviction of whoever perceives it. Therefore, when I tell you do this for 1 minute and watch the impossible manifest, I am not talking about effort, blind faith, or fleeting optimism. I am talking about inner authority. The force that moves the invisible doesn't come from the words you speak, but from the feeling that sustains them. And feeling is born from conviction. Desire, by itself, creates nothing. To desire is to acknowledge a lack. To assume is to declare possession. Reality does not respond to those who ask. It responds to those who have already decided. For this reason, for 1 minute, just one, I ask you to interrupt the world's noise. Silence the doubting mind, close your eyes to the senses that lie, and enter the space where everything is possible, the space of conscious imagination. Breathe, and begin to affirm what you have chosen to be, 100 times if necessary, not like someone trying to convince themselves, but like someone remembering, because truth doesn't need to be created, it just needs to be reaffirmed. Understand this: each repetition is a hammer blow to the invisible structure of your mind, shaping what the physical world will later display. 100 times until the word ceases to be sound and becomes flesh, until thought transforms into sensation, and sensation into certainty. At that point, there is no longer any distance between what you feel and what you experience. The exterior, which seemed solid and insurmountable, begins to bend before the new image sustained within you. And that's when the impossible loses its name. Because the impossible isn't a law, it's merely the limit of your belief. 1 minute of pure conviction is worth more than years of misaligned effort. 1 minute where you feel ownership of what you desire is worth more than 1,000 days of asking for it. The world doesn't need time to change, it needs a state to reflect. So, in this minute, do not seek. Affirm. Do not wait. Declare. Do not observe what is. Feel what will be, as if it already were. And repeat until your body obeys, until your mind silences, until your heart knows. The reflection has already changed. The impossible does not resist the one who remembers who the mirror is. Everything that exists outside of you is merely the mirror of what vibrates within. Circumstances have no life of their own. They obey the silent tone of your internal state. The most common human error is believing that the world happens to them, when in fact the world responds to them. Every word you say, every emotion you feed, every image you mentally repeat is a silent command sent to the mirror of reality. The reflection doesn't create, it merely returns what is being projected. This is why every attempt to change the exterior without first changing the interior becomes an endless struggle. It's like trying to correct a reflection without altering the face in front of the mirror. The world is a reflection, not an origin. And this is one of the simplest and most overlooked truths. As long as you strive to manipulate circumstances, people, situations, or outcomes, you continue to reinforce the idea that they have power over you. But nothing out there has any power except that which you grant it. Everything that appears, lack, abundance, love, rejection, success, or failure, is merely confirmation of the state you've decided to sustain, consciously or not. The reflection can change in 1,000 ways, but the cause is always the same, what you accept as truth deep within. Notice how faithful the reflection is. If you see yourself as limited, the world will give you proof of that limitation. If you see yourself as capable, opportunities will arrange themselves to confirm that vision. And when you change how you feel about yourself, no external force can prevent the transformation of the scenery. Reality is not stubborn, it is obedient. The problem is that most people try to command it with words, when the real command lies in feeling. It all begins when you stop reacting to the mirror and start observing it with awareness. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What within me is being reflected here?" This simple shift returns your power. What once seemed like chaos reveals itself as correspondence. You realize that each situation is a coded message, a reminder of the state you are sustaining. And from that point you can decide, continue reflecting the same or choose a new inner image. Changing your internal state doesn't require physical effort, only emotional decision. When you choose to feel differently, even if nothing has changed yet, the mirror begins to reorganize itself. Sometimes slowly, sometimes abruptly, but always in faithful response to the new image you have assumed. And it is at that instant that the impossible becomes merely a matter of time. Because the reflection does not resist, it only knows how to obey what is looking at it. Every inner word is a seed. No thought passes in vain. Every idea, every mental phrase, every feeling sustained with conviction is a silent instruction to the invisible field that shapes your life. The mind is not a repository of random thoughts. It is a fertile garden where everything planted germinates according to the nature of the seed. Thoughts of fear, doubt, and scarcity take root just as thoughts of trust, abundance, and love do. The difference lies only in what you choose to cultivate and water. People often believe that thinking is harmless, but nothing is more powerful than the internal dialogue you repeat every day. The words you murmur in silence are creative decrees, saying "I can't," "I'm never lucky," or "everything goes wrong for me," is like sowing desert seeds in your own garden. Over time, the soil responds with what it has received, and there's no way to harvest them without first changing the type of seed. When you understand this, you realize that all power lies in consciously choosing what to plant. Saying "I am capable, I am prosperous, life favors me" is not empty optimism. It is internal engineering. Each repetition makes the mind familiar with a new vibration until the body and circumstances align with it. It's a natural process. The invisible begins to move, and what was just a word becomes an experience. That's why it's so important to monitor what you say to yourself when no one is listening. Spoken words have force, but thought words have command. It is in them that the unconscious guides itself to create. What you mentally repeat becomes the vibratory pattern that the world decodes as instruction. Thus, life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you believe yourself to be. Repeating a phrase doesn't change the world immediately, but it changes the center from which the world is perceived. And when the center changes, the reflection inevitably transforms. Every time you affirm something with feeling, you are carving a new path in your own consciousness. Circumstances then bend, as if they were merely actors awaiting the new script. Therefore, choose your words as one chooses their destiny. Speak to yourself only what you wish to see reflected. Water the right ideas with emotion, and the wrong ones will die from lack of attention. The law is simple. What you repeat with feeling, you create. Words are not just sounds. They are seeds of entire worlds waiting for someone to speak them with enough faith to make them blossom. Everything that exists was born first as an image. Before any gesture, there was a vision. Before any achievement, someone dared to imagine. Imagination is the silent rehearsal of reality, the stage where the invisible trains to become visible. When you imagine something and feel as if it's already real, you are writing the script that the physical world will be compelled to enact. The mind doesn't differentiate between what is imagined and what is experienced. To it, both are facts. And that's why everything you emotionally accept as true within yourself begins to take shape outside of you, with no apparent effort. But most people use imagination as an escape, not as creation. They dream only to escape what is, instead of using the dream as an instrument to decide what will be. They imagine what they desire with longing, not with certainty. They want what they want, but continue to feel what they fear. And it is in this gap between imagining and believing that power is lost. Imagination only creates when it is felt as reality, not as possibility. When you see yourself, even in silence, living what you desire, something moves in the invisible, not by chance, but as a response. The mind is the cradle of all events. No event reaches you without first having been rehearsed in that inner theater. Every memory, every thought, every image you sustain is a continuous vibration that attracts its equivalent in the world. Therefore, conscious imagination is an act of responsibility. You cannot choose the consequences without choosing the images that generate them. Everything you see externally has already passed. It is solidified past. The future is being molded now, in what you dare to feel is true. When you begin to use imagination with purpose, something changes profoundly. Internal scenes cease to be daydreams and become decrees. You don't imagine to dream, you imagine to determine. You close your eyes and see what you have chosen to be as if it already were. You walk, speak, breathe in this new state until the vibration becomes natural. And the world, faithful as a mirror, responds with circumstances that correspond to this new inner tone. Nothing is created at the moment it appears. Everything already existed as an image before being seen. The gesture is merely the echo of the idea. The physical world is a delayed mirror. Therefore, whoever understands the power of imagination stops reacting and begins to anticipate. Instead of waiting for the future to happen, they rehearse it with feeling, knowing that the stage of life has no choice but to play the role that was written in consciousness. Imagining is the supreme art. It is seeing the invisible with such clarity that the visible hurries to catch up. Persistence is what transforms the invisible into reality. It's easy to imagine for an instant, to feel hope for a day, to repeat words for a week. The difficult part is to remain in the chosen state when nothing seems to be happening. But it is precisely then that creation begins. Doubt is the last obstacle before manifestation. It arises to test your faithfulness to the invisible. Most people give up when the reflection hasn't changed yet, which is why they remain stuck in the same cycle. The one who persists, even without proof, rewrites the code of their own existence. Persistence is not stubbornness, it is sustained conviction. It is the ability to remain steadfast in feeling, even when the entire world seems to contradict you. It is to look into the void and still say, "I know what is real." This silent certainty is what reorganizes the invisible lines of reality. While the common mind allows itself to be swayed by the senses, the awakened mind knows that the senses are delayed, showing only what has already been. To persist is to remain in the future until it becomes present. When you decide on a new state, wealth, love, health, peace, the old state will try to pull you back. It uses time, appearances, memories. But all of this is illusion. These are echoes trying to convince the Creator that the creation has not yet happened. Do not believe them. Continue sustaining the new sensation, even if the body still remembers the old. The physical world is slow, but it always obeys. It's like pushing a heavy boat. At first it doesn't move until suddenly it begins to glide. To persist is to choose loyalty to the invisible rather than reaction to the visible. It is to act as if the new is already a fait accompli, even if nothing confirms it. And the firmer you remain, the more the old loses its power. The previous vibration dissolves from lack of attention. The new state takes root until it becomes natural, and at that moment, the exterior has no choice, it must yield. No force resists a mind that refuses to doubt. Persistence is the point where imagination becomes flesh, where the invisible finds form and desire transforms into fact. Many call this a miracle, but it is merely the consequence of one who remains. The universe does not respond to haste, it responds to consistency. The one who doubts starts over at every instant. The one who persists advances, even in silence. The impossible does not collapse before desire. It collapses before persistence. Sustain the new state until it becomes more real than any contrary evidence. Because true faith does not need guarantees, it creates what does not yet exist. Inner acceptance is the final seal of creation. It is the moment when you stop trying, waiting, seeking, and simply know. Acceptance is not passivity, it is the point where conflict ends. It's when you feel effortlessly that what you desired is already a part of you. At that instant, desire ceases to be something out of reach and becomes identity. The universe, obedient to your internal tone, begins to silently reorganize itself to confirm what has been accepted as fact. Nothing happens while the mind insists on struggling. As long as you think it hasn't arrived yet, you are declaring absence. As long as you ask when will it happen, you are affirming distance. Acceptance dissolves this resistance. It is the natural state of one who understands that the game is over, that there is nothing more to conquer, only something to allow to reveal itself. When you genuinely feel that it already is, the world has no choice but to agree. To accept does not mean to wait silently for a miracle. It means to live as if it has already happened. It is to eat, walk, breathe, and think from this new point of reference. It is to act effortlessly because the conviction has already been established. The right people, opportunities, and even coincidences begin to move in your direction, attracted by the vibration that acceptance emits. And all this without haste, because time is merely the space that life uses to align the visible with what you have already decreed in the invisible. Acceptance is the opposite of anxiety. The anxious mind seeks signs, but one who has accepted already recognizes them even before they appear. It is the state of someone who observes the world with tranquility, knowing that nothing can escape what has already been determined internally. It is like planting a seed and not digging up the soil every day to see if it's growing. You trust the process, and this confidence, silent and serene, is what accelerates everything. When you truly accept, desire disappears, because there is no longer any separation between you and what you desire. The struggle ceases, the internal noise silences, and life begins to move with ease. It is at this point that the invisible crosses the border and becomes tangible. No forcing, no insisting, just allowing the inevitable to manifest. What has been accepted with conviction cannot be denied. What has been felt as real cannot be prevented. To accept is to recognize that it already is. And when the already is settles in, the impossible simply dissolves. Because the external world, however solid it may seem, has no power of its own. It is a faithful reflection of what you have decided to inhabit. And when you inhabit the final state, creation ends. All that remains is to watch the reflection align with what, within you, has already happened. Now understand, nothing outside of you has the power to decide the course of your life. Circumstances, people, time, all are merely actors on the stage that your consciousness writes. You are not here to await miracles, but to reveal them. What seems distant is not impossible. It is merely unassumed. Everything you accept as truth within yourself begins to move in your direction, and the more convinced you become, the faster the world bows to the new order. Therefore, do not beg for change. Command it. Do not wait for life to prove something to you. Prove to life that you have already decided. The universe does not understand please. It understands certainty. It does not react to desires. It reacts to states. When you say within yourself with firm feeling, I am, you are sending a decree that no force can revoke. From that instant, paths open, resistances dissolve, and what seemed distant begins to approach naturally. Do this now, just 1 minute. 1 entire minute of absolute presence, of total certainty. Choose the state you desire and immerse yourself in it as if nothing else existed. Repeat 100 times if necessary until your body feels, until your heart knows, until your mind silences, and then just remain. Because in that instant, the world has already begun to change, not because you asked, but because you assumed it. The impossible is not what cannot happen, it is merely what has not yet been sustained long enough within you. When your conviction becomes stronger than appearances, the impossible is shamed and kneels. Remember, reality is obedient. It will always follow the command of the state you decide to live in. And when the state changes, everything changes. So, from today, live as one who already possesses. Think as one who already is. Feel as one who has already triumphed. Because the law is perfect, and those who fulfill it in silence see the invisible take form before their eyes.